When you think of the Fiat brand, this is a company that has a lot of history globally. In fact, here in America, it all started out with this model here back in 1962. The original 500 offered around 18 horsepower and it was around 117 inches long. Now, obviously, a vehicle like this wouldn't work in today's market. And while Fiat did introduce a new 500 back in 2011, it lasted here in the US until about 2019, until today, where we're finally getting a brand new version of the 500. And I'm actually here in Miami, Florida, of all places, to finally get behind the wheel of this fully redesigned 2024 Fiat 500e. It's been built from the ground up to be an electric car, offering up to 149 miles of range. And for those of you who are looking for the ultimate electric city car, the big question I want to answer: has Fiat managed to create that with this new 500e? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the new 500e, I thought I'd remind you guys the previous generation. Now, this car was essentially a California compliance vehicle. It first came to the US back in 2013. It essentially just took the gas-powered 500 and converted it into an electric vehicle. So they plucked out the gas motor and the fuel tank and put in a 24 kilowatt hour battery pack, around 111 horsepower. This thing offered around 80-ish miles of range. And Fiat actually had a really aggressive lease deal back in the day when this first came out for around $99 a month. So obviously this is the old 500e, which we haven't seen in 2019, but let's go ahead and walk over to the new version, because the new version, unlike that old one, was designed from the ground up to be an electric vehicle. It's the first Stellantis vehicle built off of their Stella City architecture. So this is the first EV in the Stellantis portfolio. And because it's electric, it's fully electric, let's go ahead and open up the hood, because the million-dollar question with the EVs, does it have a frunk? And this is where I'm sad to report it does not have a frunk, and that's because Fiat said it was all about the packaging. Remember, this is still a very small vehicle, so they weren't able to kind of put the motors into the front area here that allowed for still some frunk storage. But what you're looking at here is just a single electric motor powering the front axle. So now we also have a much larger battery pack. It's around 42 kilowatt hours, so nearly twice the capacity of the original model that was introduced in the US back in 2013. The output figures here are pretty good. It's 117 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. Remember, that may not sound like a lot of power, but this is a very small vehicle. It's really not that much bigger, which we'll talk about later on during the walk around. This vehicle has a 1-speed reduction gear transmission, like I said earlier, front wheel drive. Fiat says it should be good for 0 to 60 in around 8.5 seconds, which honestly is about the same as the previous generation 500e. Again, it doesn't really need to be faster than that. We'll get into the driving scene later on when we get this vehicle out on the road. And in terms of the range, like I said earlier, it has a 42 kilowatt hour battery pack, good for around 149 miles of range on the combined cycle. Fiat says if you're driving this primarily in the city, which is, it's a city car, that's what you're going to be doing, it should be able to do around 162 miles of range. So I'll have to wait until I get one back home for a full week to do some actual extensive range testing on it. In terms of the curb weight, what's interesting, however, compared to the old generation, which wasn't built from the ground up to be an EV, this was, and as a result of that, it's the lightest EV on the market. So it weighs in at just under 3,000 pounds. It's actually around 50 pounds lighter versus the previous generation, despite the fact that this is bigger, it has more safety technology equipment on it. So that's kind of a great engineering feat done by the Fiat team. But let's go ahead and close up this hood and talk about the exterior styling, because this car, as you guys can see, is instantly recognizable as a 500. In fact, being the first vehicle built off of the Stella City architecture, the company could, have done a lot more to, change the design. But I also love how they kept the heritage look. So at the front end, you have here the new 500 logo that again is kind of painted in red, because this model here is the red edition. It's the first model coming. The models behind me we'll talk about in a moment are two additional models called Inspired by Beauty and Inspired by Music. You can see it's got the new Infinity designed full LED headlights. So you have this kind of LED halo ring, you have an LED low and high beam, you have this LED accent light here in the lower bumper, which includes also this red accent paint here. You can see the grille has a slightly different look, where obviously you don't need to have some actual openings because it doesn't have an internal combustion engine. You have some openings here, of course. And then if you guys take a look at some of the European models, Fiat actually offers an Abarth version that they've already announced, which has like 153 horsepower. No word, sadly, if that is coming to the US, but instead of 500 in the Abarth version in Europe, it actually says Abarth with the Scorpion logo, which I think is something that would look really good and do really well. Now, in terms of the proportions, you're gonna notice right away that this new model is about 1 inch taller and it's about 2 inches wider and 2 inches longer. Now, that sounds pretty significant for a little car like this, but this is still very small. Its wheelbase is around 91.7 inches long, so it's an inch longer than the previous generation. It's around 143 inches long overall, just under 143 inches long. So again, if you're thinking about the size of this vehicle, compare it to something like a Ford F-150. The crew cab short bed is literally, the wheelbase is 145 inches, so you could literally park the actual length of this car in the wheelbase of an F-150. So it's still a very small vehicle, but again, it has been increased in size to give it more space on the inside, which is important for a lot of Americans. Now, looking at the wheels, you can see there are no more cheap steelies that you can get on the previous generation, and Fiat has significantly increased the wheel size. So previously, in the old model, you had a 15-inch wheel as standard. Now, all of them come with these 17-inch kind of diamond cut wheels with the multiple spoke with the gloss black and the machine finish. It's riding on a 205 by 45 R17 tire. You have an independent front suspension along with a twist beam semi-independent rear. You have front disc brakes that are 11 inches. The rear surprisingly has drum brakes, which again, it's a small car, so you don't really need to have that additional braking capability. But overall, you can also take a pick between either a summer or an all-season tire like this particular one here. I want to show you this little piece here. So on the US market, we actually have this little marker piece, which in Europe, this is actually a side marker light, a turn signal light, but here in the US, you can't do that. So instead, it's just a clear lens with the Italian flag. The marker light is actually down here, and it's also amber. Because that's the US regulation. Looking at the rest of the profile, on this red edition, you're gonna have red painted mirrors along with the red accents in the grille. No sunroof, sadly. In Europe, they do offer a cabriolet version, which offers like a power retractable fabric roof. No word yet on when that's gonna come to the US. I'm hoping that Fiat will bring that and the Abarth version. The other thing you're also noticing, looking at the rest of the area here, you can see there's no chrome strip along the side. That's one of the trademark characteristics of the 500, which will show you guys the Inspired by Music will have that feature. And also, you'll also notice that Fiat got rid of the door handles on this car. So getting rid of the door handles allowed Fiat to essentially improve the aerodynamics and improve the range. So it has kind of like a digital latch system, which we'll talk about the interior in just a moment. Looking at the rear of the vehicle, you can see it still has that signature, design theme here with Fiat, except you have some modern elements here. So you have some full LED taillight lighting elements. You have the red Fiat logo at the back here, which if you guys want a different color on the red, it's also available in black and glacier white, which is gonna really show off the red accents here on this red color. You're not gonna see that, obviously. You can see there's also the new 500e badge here, which has the blue outlines in the back that also kind of reminds you that you're driving an electric vehicle. Obviously, no visible exhaust tips because it's electric, but this vehicle also has a lot of modern safety tech. So you have parking sensors, you have their ADAS system, although the full upper ADAS with level 2 driving is on the upper trims over there. And then in terms of the cargo area, you can see no power liftgate, obviously. It's an affordable car, but it still comes with back seats, as you can see, but I'll go ahead and I'll move this out of the way. So in terms of the cargo space, because it's built off of a dedicated EV architecture, this is where Fiat was able to improve the space. So the old 500 electric had around 7 cubic feet. This has 7.5 cubic feet, so not that much more. But as you can see, the seats do fold down in a 50-50 manner. So you can obviously expand the cargo. Because the vehicle is pretty tall, you can stack up items to the roof, which is nice. If you look underneath the floor here, there actually is a little bit of underfloor storage. There's the mobile charger, although I was told that that won't be included in the US spec cars. You'll just have a fix-a-flat kit if you guys get a flat tire, along with an inflator kit. But overall, it's still a very small vehicle on the outside, but there's still decent practicality, especially if you guys are primarily using this as a city car. Now, because the new 500e is only electric and it's built off of a dedicated EV architecture, you're probably wondering what's the charging situation like. Now, here in the US, it's going to launch with the standard J1772 plug with the CCS combo. Eventually, Fiat says they're going to adopt the NAC plug. But that's going to be coming at a later date. But with this new battery pack and the new electric vehicle architecture, this vehicle does charge faster than the previous generation. So if you guys can find a level 3 charger that supplies 150 kilowatts, this will accept up to 85 kilowatts, which basically allows you to go from 10 to 80% in about 35 minutes. So that's an average time. Remember, the battery is a lot smaller. It's only 42 kilowatt hours, but it is almost twice the capacity of the previous generation, allowing you to go 149 miles of range. It has an onboard level 2 charger that'll allow it to basically go from 0 to 100% in about 6 hours. If you guys plug it into a level 1 outlet, which is the household 110 outlet that everybody has access to, it'll take about 3 days, so 37 hours. So that's kind of like, again, a slow charge. Most of you will charge on the level 2, which 6 hours is honestly pretty fast, but again, Fiat has really improved the charging capability of this vehicle, and I think that's going to do well with a lot of EV customers. Now, let's go ahead and talk about these two models that I'm standing by up here on stage, because these two are going to be coming to the US as well, and they will be coming kind of right after the red red edition. So this model that I'm standing by here is painted in rose gold. It's a special model called Inspired by Beauty. It only comes in this rose gold exterior color. And unlike the red edition, you can see there are some more chrome accents on this vehicle. So the front has that signature kind of chrome mustache kind of going between the 500 logo. These models also come with their level 2 adaptive driving system. So this is the first Stellantis vehicle or electric vehicle in the class apparently to get that feature. So the radar sensor is going to be located behind the 500 badge. You can see it's a slightly different look versus the red edition because, again, the sensors have to live back here. I also love this rose gold color. You can see it kind of matches along the headlight design. You still have that Italian flag over here on the fender trim, which is nice. The wheels are still the same. All of them are going to come with that diamond cut wheel. And then, as you can see, Fiat also didn't want to include the signature chrome stripe along the side because, again, they wanted to kind of show off that rosy gold color. Which I think a lot of people are also going to appreciate. Now, this one over here is actually called Inspired by Music. It only comes in this black exterior color, and you can see from the front end, it has, again, a slightly more unique look to it. You still have the chrome mustache along the front, which it's painted red on the red edition. You have that same, new 500e badge here, or 500 badge that also houses the radar sensor for the level 2 adaptive driving. These models here are about $2,000 or about around $2,000 more versus the red edition. So it gives you a pretty good amount of stuff for the increase in content. Now, you also probably notice this is the only version of the 500e, the new one, that has the chrome strip along the side. So this is kind of the signature design element that people really associate with the 500. Again, it kind of contrasts nicely with the black exterior along with the chrome trim along the belt line. I really do hope that Fiat offers the cabrio roof or the cabrio at some point here in the US because they don't offer a sunroof. But overall, here in the US, you can basically choose it between the red edition and then, of course, these two inspired by models, which again should represent a good mix of the sales pie when it goes on sale later this year. So moving on to the interior of the new 500e. First of all, this interior that I'm showing you is the red edition. We're also going to show you guys the interior really quickly of the Inspired by Beauty and the Inspired by Music, because if you guys go for the red edition, you basically only have these cloth bucket seats as your only interior upholstery option. You can see it's got some contrasting red piping on it. It's got the 500 red edition badging on the actual seat back itself. And then you can also see there's this cool little detail in the actual seat insert where it actually says Fiat in there, which is a nice cool little Easter egg. Fiat is all about the Easter eggs because remember, this is a pretty charismatic brand and you're going to see that even in the interior. Now, in terms of the door panel materials, you can see, I will say that I was disappointed to see that a lot of the door panel plastics here are a hard touch injection molded plastic. I don't love the way they feel. They're a little cheap and scratchy, but remember, this is an affordable, inexpensive car. There is a nice padded area here where you'd rest your elbow. The window controls, they have the typical FCA or Stellantis quality to them. They are one touch down, but not one touch up. You have your power mirror controls, and this button here is what actually opens the door. It's a digital latch door, but in case the power's out, there's a separate redundant latch down here that allows you to actually open the door. There's also some hard paneling down here, but overall, the seats are manual. They make a pretty good, or the interior makes a pretty good first impression. It feels a lot more modern versus the previous generation. Now, getting inside, because this vehicle is it's a hatchback, it has a relatively low step-in height. As I get in and shut the door, I will say, doesn't have the most solid sounding thunk. There's like a bit of a rattle and you can feel the entire car shudders because, again, it's a pretty small vehicle, but that's a little small detail criticism here. But take a look at the key fob, guys. You can see this is a new fob for Fiat for the 500e. If you guys remember the previous generation, Fiat didn't even offer an intelligent access key. So this is a very new feature that brings it into the modern era. The old one, you had to stick a key in the ignition. Clearly, that's been removed. So now that you have a smart access system, you put your foot on the brake. Here's the start-stop button. And then you can hear the engine, or the car turns on, and it basically will say ready in the actual instrument panel, and that's how you know that the car is ready to drive. And then it also will play that separate chime, which is unique, of course, to the 500e. It's kind of like more of a charismatic, cutesy chime to let you know that the vehicle is ready to be driven. And then looking at the rest of this interior, you can see Fiat really did a lot here to bring it into the modern era. First of all of them will come standard with the latest Uconnect 5 head unit here. So this is a 10.25-inch display. The phone is already connected up via wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It also has over-the-air updates, which is nice. And then you also have a 7-inch instrument panel screen here, which is actually the same size as the previous generation, but unlike before, which had like analog displays, that's a fully digital display. It is slightly customizable based on the drive modes that you're in, but you can see it looks pretty much identical to a previous generation, just more modern. I also love the new steering wheel with the new 500 logo over here. You also have like a flat bottom design here. It's a 2-spoke design steering wheel. You can see the wheel itself has a manual tilt and telescoping adjustment. No paddles for any kind of regen braking. To access the regen, you have to go into the drive modes itself. The horn It sounds a little puny, but again, it kind of goes with the theme of how small this car is, so I kind of can give that a pass here. But in terms of the dashboard materials, let's talk about that. So the upper portion of the dash here, you can see, has a hard touch injection molded plastic. This model here just has the standard Fiat premium audio system. You can see on the red editions, you have this big red painted, glossy red painted piece of dash. So that's included with the red editions. We'll show you guys the Inspired by Beauty and Inspired by Music trims to show you the differences. There's kind of like a plastic material here, a gray matte plastic, which I don't love the texture of it. It feels a little bit cheap. But again, those are small gripes. You can see there's a big wireless phone charging pad here. There's even like looks like a kind of like a topography map of Italy, perhaps, right there on the wireless charging pad, which is nice. In the door panels here, which is where you grab the door panel to close it, it actually says made in Torino. So again, it's all about the heritage on where this car is built, as opposed to the previous model, which was built in Mexico. This is actually built in Italy, which I personally really love. You can see in terms of the dash over here, this is the gear selector to control the 1-speed reduction gear transmission. If you put the vehicle into reverse here, it does give you your backup camera. I don't believe the old 500 had a backup camera, so this is definitely a nice feature. Or at least Fiat may have added it in the later years, but you can see it has trajectory, it has distance markers, it has parking sensors, all the modern stuff that you would expect. No full 360 camera, but again, this is a very small car. You shouldn't really need a feature like that. In terms of the center stack here, you can see Fiat did add a lot more storage to this vehicle. That's one of the things they really improved on. You can see there's a cup holder here that actually flips out. So if you close that, you have this kind of flat area here. But if you flip that down, it has a good place to hold bottles. You have your drive mode selector here. So the car comes with 3 drive modes. There's a normal mode, a range mode, and a Sherpa mode. We'll talk about the drive modes later on in the driving scene. I also like how there's an actual volume knob down here. You have traditional hard buttons. This car has single zone automatic climate control, which is nice. The screen here is quick and snappy and responsive. I love the fact that every model comes standard with the big 10.25-inch display. It really looks good, especially considering how small this car is. It really just kind of adds to the whole, tech interface and makes this car feel a lot more modern. There's a nice padded, armrest over here, and if you open this up, you can see there's a little bit more center console storage. There's more storage over here, which is nice. There's 2 USB charging ports, an A and a C, and then there's also a separate USB over here. Now, this is the USB that you would use to connect to your phone, so you can essentially do connection via wireless CarPlay, or you can also do it via the actual USB-A connection there. So it's nice that Fiat gives you the choice of the 2 things. You can see the seats. I will say for a cloth seat, I don't typically love cloth, but they are comfortable and supportive, and the cloth material feels nice. It doesn't feel cheap, although I am surprised to see that there's no heated seats, and again, no power seats. I'm okay with no power seats, but I would have liked to see heated seats, especially at this price point. You can see the glove box is huge. If I open that up, you can see it goes into the dash. It offers a ton of storage. The lid itself is also damped, but not lined with felt. But again, it's nice to find a small car like this and find all this additional storage. That's something that Fiat really worked hard to give us additional storage. And then if you guys are looking at the backseat area, I'll show you guys that real quick. So in Europe, they actually offer a model that has a half door here, but here in America, Fiat couldn't make that work because of regulations, safety regulations. So instead, you just have the 2 doors. So to get into the backseat area, pull that little lever, you can see that will flip the seat forward. So let me go ahead and get back there and show you guys the space for somebody my height. Now, I'm 5'7", so I'm not the tallest person, but let me go ahead and get back here and show you guys the space. Now, getting back here, it's not too terrible, and then move the seat back. So this is where the seat's coming almost all the way back. I'm definitely noticing my knees are kind of slammed up against the seat back, so I'd have to ask the driver or the passenger to move their seat forward. Fiat says there's 29 inches of legroom back here, which 29 is not a lot, but I will say because of the car's tall, bubbly roof, you do have a good amount of headroom space. But as I kind of lean back here, my hair is already grazing the ceiling, so obviously this is really reserved for small children or average size adults. This only seats 2 back here because you can see there's a cup holder area here, which they said that they actually added this cup holder for the US market, which is nice because there are, I think, a total of 6 cup holders in this vehicle. No USB or air vents back here. You do have like hard touch plastic materials back here. You have a small little window, which is nice, although I would have liked to see Fiat put like an armrest here, especially considering there's no middle passenger area. But again, overall, for a backseat area for a car this small, there is a surprising amount of space, but just keep in mind if your friends are taller than me, like over 5'9", this is definitely not going to be the most comfortable place on longer drives. So here we are finally behind the wheel of the new 500e. Remember, this car is only coming to the US as an electric model, and Fiat says you should get to 60 in 8.5 seconds. So we have it on almost a full charge. It showed around 140 miles of range on a full charge, which is pretty good, although again, the EPA says 149. Fiat says 162 if you're going to be in more city conditions. But again, it's going to be enough range for most people to kind of do their daily commuting on a weekly basis. But let's go ahead and see if we can get anywhere close to that 8.5 second time that Fiat says. So we'll just basically floor it, and it's in normal mode. Feels a little soft off the line, but again, it's got that instant electric motor torque. 8.7 seconds. Now, I also do have my editor Martin in the car with me as well, so we have a little bit extra weight in the vehicle, but still 8.7 is not bad at all, because remember, we only have 117 horsepower, 162 pound-feet of torque. I'll have to get one back home to retest at some point. I actually think it could be slightly faster than that. Remember, the numbers aren't necessarily important with an EV, because what you feel is just instantaneous power. So anytime I put my foot down, it just kind of picks up speed immediately. There's kind of instant throttle response. There's no waiting for gears to change or for engines to rev and whatnot. It just has lots of smooth linear power. So I like the way that Fiat has kind of tuned this transmission. Now, we are driving here at highway speeds, and we're on this kind of concrete bridge. We're actually out here heading toward Miami Beach right now. I do notice there's a little bit more road noise than I expected, but again, this is a small city car. It's literally an A-segment car. But what is surprising is the ride quality of the 500e. We have an independent front suspension with a semi-independent twist beam at the back, so it's not independent. But this car kind of goes over bumps and glides down with really nice smoothness. In fact, compared to the previous generation, which I hadn't driven one in a few years, I never really liked the way those cars rode or drove at times. They just felt a little bit tippy. But because now we have that battery pack that lines the floor, it lowers the center of gravity, and it really just improves the overall quality, ride quality, and just the planted feeling of the vehicle. So here at highway speeds, it actually glides down the road nicely. I don't hear too much now in terms of noise because we're on a slightly different part of the freeway here. But in terms of the seat comfort, these are the cloth seats that come with the red edition. You can also get a vegan leather if you guys are looking at any of the inspired models, the Inspired by Beauty or the Inspired by Music. And in terms of visibility, Fiat says that they worked hard to address the seating position of this vehicle. So the seats are a little bit lower, so it no longer feels like you're sitting up like in this high chair like in the previous model. The hood obviously is nice and short, so you can kind of see over it nicely. This view out of the front and the side is good. This vehicle also comes, of course, with Fiat's latest driver assistance tech. So we have automatic emergency braking, we have blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist. And if you guys go for the Inspired by models, you'll actually include adaptive cruise control with kind of a hands-free driving, which is apparently the first vehicle in the segment to get. But as we exit off the freeway here, this is where, again, most Fiat 500e owners will probably end up driving, is just around town in the city. This is where, low-speed driving is where you're going to notice this car has plenty of power because, again, we have all that extra, torque. I think it actually, it feels really nice in day-to-day driving. And then you also have slightly different drive modes here. So I've been driving the car in normal mode, but I'll actually switch it over to range mode. And when you put it into range mode, this is where the car will give you a one-pedal driving feature. So the one-pedal drive feature, every time I lift off the throttle, it automatically, gives you some regen braking. And it's definitely nice for city driving because this is where you're constantly in stop and go traffic. You don't have to be on the brakes, you're just on the regen brakes, so it's putting energy back in the battery pack. And I think Fiat's done a good job of tuning the regen braking.
Alton Road for 6.
It doesn't feel that much slower than the normal mode. There's no sport mode in this vehicle, which I'm actually kind of surprised that Fiat didn't do a sport mode, but there's also another mode called Sherpa. Sherpa mode happens when I basically turn this toggle down one more notch and kind of thinking of it as a range max mode. So when you're in this mode, it actually limits the vehicle's top speed to 50 miles an hour. It also reduces the max power from like 87 kilowatts to 57 kilowatts. However, you can bypass that by simply flooring the accelerator pedal, and it also will turn off accessories like the air conditioning and the heated seats, for example. You can, again, turn it back on if it's stifling hot outside like it is in Miami to get the air conditioning back on. But again, the Sherpa mode is kind of like a range max mode. I suspect most people will just have it, be driving it in range mode. Which I think gives you kind of that nice balance between, the feel of an electric car with the regen braking, and it also kind of gives you that good acceleration that you're looking for with a lot of these EVs. Now, we are here in Florida, and this is a state that's known for basically straight roads and very little elevation, but I managed to find a couple of corners here, and this is where the 500e, again, Fiat claims that it's one of the most fun to drive small EVs you're going to find. I mean, obviously, I haven't had a chance to drive the new Mini Cooper SE or Mini Cooper E Electric, which should be coming out later this year as well. But I will say that this car's steering is very light, and it doesn't really transmit much in terms of feedback. But because of the new battery pack that's mounted low, the car no longer feels quite as top heavy and tipsy as the previous generation. Now, I never had a chance to drive the old 500e that was basically a gas car converted into electric vehicle, but you can tell that this platform just feels a lot more cohesive. It feels like it was built from the ground up to be an electric vehicle, architecture. So in terms of handling, yes, the vehicle is fun to drive, but you can get a sense that there's a faster, sharper version, the Abarth. I really want Fiat to offer the Abarth version here in the States. And when I asked about it, they basically said that they're going to have to wait and see. They're trying to gauge this car's, when it comes to the US, they're trying to gauge what the US market is looking for in terms of interest, in terms of configurations and whatnot. So right now, there's a very limited number of configurations, including colors that you can get. So hopefully if you guys have your eye on this vehicle and sales actually do better than what Fiat expects, we should be able to get the convertible version here, should be able to get the Abarth version here, because I would like to have a sunroof. Now I will say that for a small car, there's actually a pretty good amount of headroom in here. You guys, I don't know if you can see my editor, Martin, he's actually in the passenger seat. He's a pretty tall dude, like 6'2", but he actually has a pretty good amount of headspace in here, so I think that's important if you guys are, taller folks. Fiat basically said that they wanted this interior to have enough space for, taller Americans, and because the vehicle is wider, you have an extra 1.65 inches of width inside the cabin, so that's gonna make a big difference, especially if you got two, bigger, wider guys sitting in the front seats. It's gonna give you additional space to kind of spread out a little bit more. Now, granted, this is still a very small car, so obviously if you want more space, buy something, a class above. A Chevrolet Bolt EUV, for example, is going to offer more space. But I would argue that this car, along with its competitor, its rival, the Mini Cooper SE, just has a lot more charm and has a lot more, charisma, and I think that's going to be important, especially if you're looking to get this as like an extra car, as a city car. I'm just happy that something like this exists, and it really shows that Fiat, is kind of testing the waters with coming back to the U.S. Because there was a time where the old 500 actually did pretty well for them in terms of sales, but then sales just continued to taper off as we kind of headed toward an SUV, love affair here in the States, which you also can find pretty much elsewhere. But overall, I like it. I really loved the idea of this car when I first saw it. Obviously they've had it around in Europe since 2020. But I'm just really happy to see it here in the US. But now I think Fiat just needs to follow it up with the Cabriolet version and the Abarth version. So hopefully there's enough demand, there's enough people out there that buy this thing that shows Fiat that they should bring other variants to kind of expand their product portfolio. So it's hard to believe that it's been about 12 years since Fiat first made their return to the US with the 500 back in 2011. And I have to say, when Fiat first came back to America, I was super excited. In fact, the country was excited because sales for the 500 peaked at around 47,000 units for the entire year. That was like back in 2012. And sadly for Fiat, every year sales kind of went downhill, ending back in 2019 with about 3,000 units sold of the 500 model. So after finally getting a chance to spend some time with the all-electric 500e, I have to say, Fiat has essentially captured the magic of the original model, which I suspect obviously was their goal. However, they finally have brought the new 500e into the modern world. As you guys saw, the electric powertrain really changes the overall driving feel of this vehicle. In fact, in terms of the performance in city driving, it basically drives exactly how you'd want a 500e to drive. It's very nimble, it's very sporty, it's very compact. You can easily get it around smaller and tighter parking areas. But as you guys saw, acceleration was also pretty good, 0 to 60 around 8.7 seconds, which is also reasonably quick given the fact that I also had an extra passenger on board. In terms of the ride quality, on smoother pavement, we noticed that it rode pretty good. However, there were a couple of times where there were a few more bumps where I noticed that the entire body kind of shifted around a little more than I expected. That's because, again, of the twist beam semi-independent rear suspension and the fact that this car also has pretty low profile tires. They're 17-inch wheels on a vehicle that's this small. In terms of the interior materials, I do wish that Fiat had done a little bit more higher quality materials. But again, if you guys want a nicer interior with leather, that's where the Inspired by Beauty and the Inspired by Music models come into play. I'm looking forward to eventually getting one of those for a full week to test, because I think those are the models that more people, more enthusiasts are going to prefer, because the Red Edition is a little bit Spartan in terms of just the luxury features on the interior. But again, everything's kind of to a certain price point. Really, if you guys are looking to get your hands on the 500e, this is where Fiat says they are heading to dealerships now. Now, of course, with the Keybridge being out in Baltimore, they were facing a few setbacks because they had to re-divert a lot of their vehicles that were coming from the plant in Italy to a different port, but that's kind of the big story here with the new 500. Unlike the previous generation, this is now built in Italy, in Turin, Italy, as opposed to Mexico. Actually, these cars are actually built alongside the Maserati Gran Turismo, apparently at the same factory, so you can kind of have that bragging right if you guys are looking to get your hands on one of these. And basically, Fiat says that if you're looking to buy one, they're kind of doing it in a way where you can order it online, but then it goes to your local Fiat dealership. So you can essentially pick the car that you want, and that's where now, Fiat is simplifying the ordering process, because if you guys want the red edition, they are available to order now, and pricing is going to start at $32,500. That's plus the $1,595 destination charge. And basically, there are only two options to add, either summer tires or all-season tires, or you can get a level 2 charger that's included, or you can also get charging credits if you guys would rather go to a public fast charger. And then, of course, in this model here, you can take your pick between either black, red, or white. Obviously, I'm showing you guys the red color. The Inspired by Beauty, Inspired by Music trims, those are going to cost you around $34,000 plus destination, so about $36,000. So still a reasonable deal. It's really going to depend on where the Mini Cooper SE is going to go in terms of pricing, because I think Fiat has definitely priced this right. I'll be curious to see what the lease deal is, because these vehicles are built in Italy. The battery is supplied by Samsung. If you buy one, it won't qualify for the $7,500 federal tax rate, but if you lease it, however, I suspect Fiat will eventually come out with a strong lease deal, and we should be seeing, again, more news on that as we get closer to the on-sale date, which should be sometime in the next month or so. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this brand new 2024 Fiat 500e. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.